Hello guys, today we will take a look at a build which will be extremely popular and powerful in the upcoming Season 4 of New World. The reason for that are few changes to some of the artifacts in the game, but also maybe some of the artifacts that we expect to come into the game as well. If you don't already guessed it, well, I will help you. That would be the flamethrower build combined with the blunderbuss as a secondary weapon. As we all know, the fire staff and the blunderbuss is not a new combination to the game. We know it already for its high damage potential, and of course we know that it's currently even used in the meta of the wars. However, at the moment specifically the flamethrower is not that convincing on a high level of play. This is due to the fact that the flamethrower struggles against heavy melees which have a lot of staggers. That's why most of the fire staff users in the current meta are going for a killer squads, and they use mainly the fireball, pillar and burnout abilities. For other anti-heal builds that the fire staff is involved with, they also play instead of the burnout, meteor shower. However, with the upcoming Season 4, we're gonna see a huge boost and a lot of potential in the flamethrower side. This is mainly due to the fact that the Fire Staff Inferno artifact will be changed as well. What is changing is the main damage source of the weapon, since currently it's scaling with strike, and of course from the next season it will be reverted back to fire damage. On first glance it doesn't mean a lot, but if you go into deeper details you would see that currently the Fire Staff Inferno is applying strike damage, which is not gaining any benefits from the intelligence tree. This means that all of the bonuses from the intelligence side are not applicable at all to your strike damage. However, all those things will change as soon as Season 4 hits, due to the fact that the priority and main damage of the Inferno will be again fire damage. Therefore, all of the bonuses in the skill tree of the intelligence will boost the damage to higher ground. Of course, that's not all, due to the fact that also the passive of the Inferno is 20% increased damage output for targets up to 8 meters. As we all know, the flamethrower and the incinerate are really good close combat abilities, and they are under this threshold of 8 meters. Something really important to mention here is also the fact that the burnout, which we're gonna use as a third ability of the kit, is also applying its damage to targets under 8 meters. Even if you are flying or ending your burnout, all the targets that are hit around you will gain those 20% extra. Last but not least, compared to the Inferno that we have now, the future Inferno will not have the Incinerate perk on it. This means that it will gain a bigger scope of potential builds and of course bigger variety. The current perk of the Incinerate will be replaced by Keenly Empowered, and it will be passively added to the Inferno together with the current Vicious. Therefore, you can only choose the last third perk, and I think the best suit for that would be Attunement or Shirking Element. So without further ado, let's go over the different skill trees that we will use for this build, and we will explain why they are so important. First, we will start with the Fire Staff, and as we can see, most of the points that we're gonna use will be on the right side. Something really interesting to note is that we will not go for either of the two ultimate abilities. First and most important is the flamethrower ability, which will basically replace our basic attacks and other combos that we usually know for the Fire Staff. As we know, this ability can put out constant damage pressure on targets, and of course it can only be stopped if we get staggered. Therefore, the second ability that we have to really pay attention to is the Incinerate. As the Incinerate will provide us a grid while casting, this is super important to keep in mind, as we can avoid many of the staggers and crowd controls from the enemy players. Last but not least, the Burnout is a perfect addition for repositioning ourselves or chasing down targets that are maybe running away from us. Of course, we would want to take most of the passives from the right side, as if we go one by one and look at them, we will see a lot of nice bonuses. For example, the Pyromania will give us 10% increased damage to targets with Burn and Smolder. Heat Up will give us a burning stack on the enemies whenever we dodge their attack. Then of course, Let It Burn will keep 10% of Fortify on us as long as someone is burning from our Smolder effects. Kindle is something that increases with 20% our smolder effects, and then of course Watch It Burn, providing an extra smolder stack for each critical hit. Last but not least, combat speed is super important to keep up with the distance of running people, as it will provide us 10% haste whenever we use an active ability. Technically this means that as long as the flamethrower is used, we get a 10% movement speed bonus. The last two passives will be taken from the left side, and the first one is not that necessary, as we don't really need to heavy attack people for 10% cooldown, but however we need 1 point in order to open the Clear Mind, which will provide us 5% in power. Then if we go over to the Blunderbuss side, you would straight up notice that something is off. Why we don't have Shrapnel Blast? Many of you most likely are asking this question right now, but I can tell you straight up why that's the case. First of all, when you are running flamethrower build, the only main source of damage which you should be looking at is the flamethrower itself. Therefore, the Blunderbuss here is just a tool which will provide us with some extra utility. And what better utility than having a net shot which will slow the enemies and reduce their stamina recovery, and of course the blast shot which will provide extra rend and of course knockdown on all enemies that are around us. Those two abilities would be super helpful for running our flamethrower build, and they would be extremely valuable not only for us but also for all our teammates around us. Of course, last but not least, the favorite and the most important ability from the Blunderbuss kit, and that's the splitting grenades. Again, same as in the Firestaff skill tree, we would also like to have some of the passives from the Blunderbuss tree. Of course, here we would aim to get all of the passives which are providing us extra fortify. As we are already in medium gear, this will provide more value to us apart from being light. For example, the passive on a row, which is on the right side of the skill tree, will provide us a 3% fortify for 10 seconds, which can stack up to 5 times whenever we trigger ability. Then another passive on the right side, which is really crucial and important for us, is Last Chance. This will provide us a fortify and increased armor by 30% for 4 seconds whenever our HP drops under 50%. And of course, last but not least, another fortifying passive, which is located on the left side, is Fortifying Aggression, which basically will provide us with a fortify for hitting targets up to 3 meters. As we already had a brief look over to the skill trees of both weapons, let's go over to the gears and of course the different perks which will be necessary for this to work. As I mentioned earlier, we're gonna run medium gear, so of course this provides us an option to use some of the heavy pieces. Exactly this is the reason to take the Void Darkplate artifact and use it as a heavy chest. As last perk on it, we would want to have a Trust Conditioning on the place of health. The reason for that is because I believe that health is only viable and best defensive perk on light pieces of gear. Therefore, as we are running medium, we would have more benefit running different types of defense. For a headpiece, I would go with Trust Conditioning, Accelerating Flamethrower and Shirking Fortification. For chest piece, like I mentioned, I would take the Void Darkplate with Enchanted Ward, Physical Aversion, both as already placed perks, and of course third perk as I mentioned, Trust Conditioning. Then I'm gonna go with Heavy Gloves, which will be with Shirking Fortification, Plague Splitting Grenades and Flame Conditioning. For the pants, I would go with Shirking Fortification, Fortifying Burnout and Flame Conditioning. And last but not least, the boots, I would go with another Flame Conditioning, Incinerate perk and of course Shirking Fortification. As you can already see, I'm heavily betting over the conditioning perks, as I believe that they are really suitable for builds which you know your opponents. In this case, when we are running flamethrower in medium, we know that most of the outcomes in our fights will be against greatswords, spears, sword and shields, and maybe some hatchets. Therefore, it's really necessary for us to have the correct defensive stats and of course the correct mitigation of damage. For amulet, I would take health / protection with stamina recovery, and I would use a fire gem. For a ring, I would use definitely hearty fire damage and leeching, due to the fact that leeching will provide me a small sustain but constant one, and it would boost my incinerate passive. For an earring, I would usually take the Endless Thirst with the last perk of regenerating, but of course if the Mastermind ring comes out, then the build might change. Last but not least, the two weapons that are really necessary for this build to work are the Inferno, as I already mentioned, and of course a Blunderbuss with net shot, keenly empowered and enchanted. The net shot on the weapon will reduce the stamina regeneration by 60% on the enemy hit, and if we manage to proc the keenly empowered from the weapon, we will be able to transfer this to the fire staff, since both of the weapons will have the keenly empowered. Of course, for a rune we would like to have vines and to keep all the targets around us rooted, and also we would choose the vines that is providing us even more leeching, which will be the cunning Heartrune of grasping vines. On the attribute sides, I would basically go for only split between intelligence and constitution, and also without putting any points into strength to boost the blunderbuss. This is the reason because I usually would go only to damage with my flamethrower, and as I mentioned already a few times, the blunderbuss will be only used for a tool of utility. If we manage to get 200 constitution and we have all gear at 700 gear score, also using the highest tier of buff, we should be able to reach 422 intelligence. Regarding the gems that we're gonna use for this set of gear, as you saw already, we are going with a lot of conditional perks. This means that we will basically aim to get a lot of protection from different types of damage, and I'm gonna simply tell you how much we're gonna get on flat and how much after conditional perks being in use. For fire damage, we would get a flat of 12% fire protection due to the 2 rubies slotted in our amulet and ring. Then of course, if our flame condition perks proc by fire damage, we will have 3 of them, so this is in total 15% fire protection. Looking into the physical damage outputs, we're gonna have a total of 10% physical protection by our ignited onyxes, which will be 10% into physical, that is distributed in strike, thrust, and of course slash protection. Then of course the 15% slash protection that we get from the amulet, and the other conditional perks for thrust conditioning that are providing another 10% after receiving thrust damage. Also something to note is that the best consumable for defense would be the oak flesh instead of anything else, and this is due to the fact that we are running void dark plate, which is increasing our armor, and of course, as we all know, the oak flesh is providing us 35% increased armor. And with that, guys, I think it's safe to say that those are the basics for this build. Of course, it would be really nice if I had some gameplay for you so I can show you what I mean by all those playstyles, but unfortunately I don't have the necessary gear yet, and of course the biggest change of the Inferno is not yet live, so we really need to wait for the Season 4 update. However, as soon as the Season 4 is out there, I will make sure that I will gonna get that gear, I'm gonna make some gameplay for you guys, and I will definitely post another video as an update, and I will make sure to let you guys know what I think about the build when it's live and is it working as we expect it to be. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to see some more of that content, and of course if you want to check me live on stream, please make sure to follow my stream on Kick as well. We are streaming almost daily with a lot of PvP action and of course wars, so make sure that you don't miss out the next stream. Thanks once again, and I will see you on the next one.